I knew my marriage was over the moment Bruce walked in, whistling Vivaldi, reeking of Chanel, and dropped his briefcase on my antique entryway table like nothing had changed. "I slept with my boss," he said, teeth gleaming. "I don't regret it." I spooned another bite of my mother-in-law's lasagna into my mouth and wondered if I should offer him seconds. Before we dive deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The kitchen was spotless, as always. Every surface gleamed under the recessed lighting I'd insisted on during our renovation 3 years ago. The same renovation Bruce had complained about endlessly, claiming we didn't need to spend $30,000 on a kitchen when the old one was perfectly fine. Now he stood in that kitchen, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the marble tiles, telling me about his affair with the casual indifference of someone discussing the weather. "Kate, did you hear me?" Bruce's voice carried that familiar note of irritation he used when he thought I wasn't paying attention. "I said I slept with Cora, my boss, multiple times." I set down my fork and looked at him properly for the first time since he'd walked in. Bruce Hart, at 44, was still conventionally handsome in that polished, suburban way that had first attracted me in college. Sandy brown hair, blue eyes, the kind of smile that made PTA mothers giggle during school fundraisers. But standing there in his rumpled suit, tie askew, he looked smaller somehow, diminished. "I heard you," I said, reaching for my wine glass. "How long?" 6 months. He loosened his tie completely, draping it over the back of his chair like he'd done thousands of times before. "It started at the Morrison account retreat in Denver. Kate, she gets me in ways you never have." I almost laughed. Cora Watson, daughter of board member Richard Watson, 35 years old and never married, with her perfectly straight blonde hair and her collection of red power suits. I'd met her exactly twice at company Christmas parties, where she'd barely acknowledged my existence while hanging on Bruce's every word. "Does she know you're telling me this?" I asked, taking another sip of wine. The Pinot Grigio was excellent, a bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. Apparently, this qualified. Bruce shifted uncomfortably. "We discussed it. She thinks honesty is important in relationships." How modern of her. I stood up, carrying my plate to the sink. "I assume you're planning to leave me for this paragon of honesty." Bruce faltered, clearly expecting a different reaction. Tears, perhaps, screaming, thrown dishes. "I thought we should talk about it first." "Talk about what exactly?" I rinsed my plate with deliberate care, watching the water swirl down the drain. "You've made your choice. You've been making it for 6 months, apparently, in hotel rooms and her office and wherever else you two have been playing house." "It's not like that." Bruce's voice rose slightly. "This isn't some sordid affair, Kate. We have a real connection. We talk about literature, about art, about things that matter." Now I did laugh, a short, sharp sound that echoed off the kitchen walls. "Literature? Bruce, you haven't read a book that wasn't a business manual in 15 years. But please, tell me more about your intellectual connection with the woman who thinks 50 Shades of Grey is high art." Bruce's face flushed. "You don't know her." "I know enough." I dried my hands on the dish towel, folding it precisely and hanging it on its designated hook. "I know she drives a BMW her daddy bought her. I know she lives in that glass tower downtown because she thinks it makes her sophisticated. I know she's never been married because she's been too busy climbing corporate ladders on her back." "That's enough." Bruce slammed his hand on the counter, making the salt and pepper shakers jump. "I didn't come here to listen to you tear down Cora." "Then why did you come here, Bruce?" I turned to face him fully, crossing my arms. "What exactly did you expect? That I'd thank you for your honesty and wish you well?" I expected. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. "I don't know. Some kind of adult conversation about how we handle this." "Handle what? The divorce?" I walked to the kitchen island, where my laptop sat closed. Or did you think I'd be willing to share you? Maybe Cora and I could work out a schedule. Don't be ridiculous. I'm not being ridiculous, Bruce. I'm being practical, which is more than you've been. I opened the laptop, the screen casting a blue glow across the granite countertop. You want an adult conversation? Fine. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to pack a bag and leave tonight. You're going to stay wherever Cora wants you to stay, and you're going to wait to hear from my lawyer. Bruce stared at me. Your lawyer? Did you think I'd handle this myself? File papers at the courthouse like some amateur? I pulled up my browser, fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. I've been married to you for 18 years, Bruce. I know exactly how your mind works. You think you can have your cake and eat it too. You think you can keep the house, the car, the comfortable life while you play with your new toy. It's not like that, isn't it? I looked up from the screen. Tell me, does Cora know about our joint accounts, our investments, the life insurance policy that makes me the primary beneficiary? Does she know that the house is in my name because my parents provided the down payment? Bruce's face went pale. Kate, you can't just... I can't what? Protect myself, secure my future. I clicked through several browser tabs, each one a different financial institution. I've been the head librarian at 3 different branches, Bruce. I know how to research. I know how to plan. And I've been planning for this conversation longer than you might think. What do you mean? I turned the laptop screen toward him. Bank statements, credit card bills, phone records. I mean, I've known about Cora for 3 months. I know about the hotel charges on our joint credit card. I know about the jewelry purchases that never made it home to me. I know about the weekend in Chicago when you told me you were at a conference. Bruce's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You've been spying on me. I've been paying attention, something you stopped doing a long time ago. I closed the laptop with a soft click. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? The late nights, the sudden interest in going to the gym, the new cologne. You've been about as subtle as a neon sign. If you knew, why didn't you say anything? Because I wanted to see how far you'd go, how much you'd lie, how little you thought of me. I walked to the wine rack, selecting another bottle. The answer, in case you're wondering, is quite far, quite a lot, and apparently very little. Bruce slumped into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 44 years. So what now? Now you pack, now you leave, now you go start your new life with Cora and see how it works when you don't have me managing your schedule, paying your bills, and cleaning up your messes. I uncorked the wine with a satisfying pop. I'm curious to see how long it takes her to realize that you're not quite the catch you pretend to be. Kate, please, can't we at least try counseling? Talk this through? I poured wine into a fresh glass, savoring the rich burgundy color. Bruce, you just told me you don't regret sleeping with another woman for 6 months. You told me she understands you in ways I never have. Why on earth would I want to work on a marriage with someone who feels that way? Because we have history. We built a life together. We had history. I built a life. You just lived in it. I took a sip of wine, letting the flavor roll across my tongue. Go pack your things. Take what you need for a few days. We'll sort out the rest through lawyers. Bruce stood slowly, like an old man. I never wanted it to happen this way. How did you want it to happen? You wanted me to be grateful for the scraps of your attention while you played house with your boss. I set down my wine glass and looked at him directly. You wanted me to be the understanding wife who looked the other way while you had your midlife crisis. I wanted... He trailed off, shaking his head. You wanted everything. The stable home, the devoted wife, and the exciting affair. Well, congratulations, Bruce. You've made your choice. Now you get to live with it. He left the kitchen without another word. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, the opening and closing of drawers, the zip of a suitcase. 30 minutes later, the front door closed with a soft click. I sat alone in my perfect kitchen, surrounded by the life I'd built, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The house was quiet, except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of Mrs. Peterson's dog barking next door. I opened my laptop again and created a new document. At the top, I typed, Project Silent Storm. Bruce thought he knew me. He thought I was the quiet librarian wife who would cry and beg and make it easy for him to be the victim. He thought Cora was the exciting one, the dangerous one, the one who would fight for what she wanted. He was about to learn how wrong he could be. I picked up my phone and scrolled to my sister's number. Victoria answered on the first ring. Kate, it's late. Is everything okay? Bruce just confessed to his affair and moved out, I said calmly. Can you be here at 7 tomorrow morning? Bring the papers we discussed. There was a pause, then Victoria's voice, sharp and satisfied. It's about damn time. I'll bring coffee too. Make it strong, we have work to do. I hung up and returned to my document. Project Silent Storm was about to begin, and Bruce Hart had no idea what was coming for him. The alarm went off at 5:30, just like it had every morning for the past 10 years. I lay in bed for exactly 30 seconds, staring at the ceiling, before the reality of the previous night settled over me like a warm blanket. Bruce was gone. The house was mine. And today, the real work began. I made coffee in my pristine kitchen, scrambled eggs for 3 people, and set the table with my grandmother's china. The same china Bruce had wanted to sell last year to help fund his investment opportunity in some friend's restaurant venture. I'd refused, and now I was grateful for my stubbornness. At 6:45, I heard a car in the driveway. Through the front window, I watched a massive black pickup truck park where Bruce's BMW usually sat. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Marcus Caldwell, my personal trainer for the past 2 years. 6'4", 230 pounds of solid muscle, with the kind of presence that made people step aside in grocery store aisles. Morning, Kate, Marcus said when I opened the door. He was carrying a gym bag and wearing a knowing smile. Victoria called me last night, said you might need some moral support today. More like physical intimidation, I said, leading him to the kitchen. But I appreciate the euphemism. Marcus laughed, a deep rumble that filled the space Bruce's voice had occupied for so many years. Where do you want me? Bruce's chair. Make yourself comfortable. I served Marcus a plate of eggs, bacon and toast, watching him fill Bruce's space at the breakfast table. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. Marcus was everything Bruce wasn't, straightforward, reliable, and completely comfortable with who he was. Victoria said this has been building for a while, Marcus said between bites. 3 months of surveillance, 6 months of lies, 18 years of taking me for granted. I refilled his coffee cup. But who's counting? What's the plan? Before I could answer, I heard the familiar sound of Bruce's key in the front door. He'd clearly expected to sneak in, grab more clothes, maybe have another adult conversation about our situation. Instead, he walked into the kitchen to find Marcus Caldwell eating his breakfast at his table. Bruce stopped in the doorway. What the hell is this? Breakfast, I said cheerfully. Marcus, you remember my husband Bruce? Bruce, you know Marcus. Marcus looked up from his eggs and nodded. Bruce, heard you had some news to share yesterday. Bruce's face went through several shades of red. Kate, what is this? Some kind of joke? No joke, just breakfast with a friend. I poured myself coffee and leaned against the counter. Did you need something? I thought you'd moved out. I came to get more clothes. And to talk. Talk away, Marcus said mildly, cutting another piece of bacon. Don't mind me. Bruce looked between us, clearly trying to process the situation. Kate, can we have some privacy? Why? Yesterday you were all about honesty and adult conversations. Marcus is very mature. I'm sure he can handle whatever you need to say. This is ridiculous. Bruce moved toward the stairs. I'll just get my things. Actually, I said, pulling a manila envelope from the counter, you might want to look at these first. Bruce took the envelope suspiciously. What is it? Separation papers. Victoria dropped them off an hour ago. She's very efficient. Bruce's face went white as he scanned the documents. Kate, you can't be serious. We talked about this yesterday. You talked. I listened. Now I'm acting. I sipped my coffee, enjoying the warmth. You'll notice I've been quite generous. You can keep your personal belongings, your car, and half the money in our savings account. Half? Kate, I need more than that. I have expenses, obligations. To Cora? Marcus asked conversationally. Must be expensive keeping up with a boss lady. Bruce shot him a furious look. This doesn't concern you. Doesn't it? Marcus stood up, all 6 feet 4 inches of him. He wasn't threatening exactly, just present, very present. Kate's my friend, has been for 2 years. I don't like seeing friends get disrespected. Kate, tell your friend to back off. Marcus isn't the problem here, Bruce. I set down my coffee cup. The problem is that you seem to think you can waltz back in here and negotiate like you have some kind of leverage. Bruce pulled out his phone. I'm calling the bank. You can't just freeze our accounts without my consent. I can freeze my accounts, I said. The ones my salary funds. The ones my name is on. Feel free to call your bank about your account. Bruce's fingers moved across his phone screen. I watched his expression change from confident to confused to panicked. There's $73 in my checking account, he said slowly. Sounds about right. That's what was left after you paid for last weekend's hotel room. I walked to the kitchen island and picked up a stack of papers. Credit card statements, Bruce. Very illuminating reading. You can't do this. This is financial abuse. Marcus snorted. Financial abuse? Man, you spent 6 months charging hotel rooms and jewelry for your side piece to your wife's credit cards. If anyone's been financially abused, it's Kate. Bruce's phone rang. He answered it quickly. Mom. No, What? Who told you that? His face crumpled as he listened. Mom, it's not... Can you just listen for a minute? Mom? He stared at his phone. She hung up on me. I called your mother this morning, I said pleasantly. Had a lovely chat about your situation. She was very disappointed. Used some words I didn't know she knew. You had no right. I had every right. She asked me how I was doing, and I told her the truth. Apparently, honesty runs in the family. Or it used to. Bruce's phone buzzed with a text message. Then another. And another. Looks like word's getting out, Marcus observed. Bruce stared at his phone. Linda sent the hotel receipts to everyone at work. Everyone. Kate. The whole office. Linda's Cora's assistant, right? I asked innocently. Sweet girl. We had coffee yesterday afternoon. I showed her some very interesting photos from your phone, the ones you forgot to delete from the cloud backup. What photos? But Bruce's voice was hollow. He knew. The ones from Cora's office. Very unprofessional, Bruce. I'm sure HR will have thoughts. Bruce's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID made him go pale. It's security at Morrison Associates. You should probably answer that, Marcus suggested. Bruce took the call. The conversation was brief and one-sided. When he hung up, he looked like he'd been hit by a truck. They deactivated my keycard, and Cora's were suspended pending investigation. That was fast, I said, but then Linda did send those photos to the entire company directory, including the board of directors, including Cora's father. Bruce sank into a chair that wasn't his anymore. Kate, what have you done? What you should have done months ago. I made a choice. I walked to the window and looked out at the driveway. Speaking of choices, you might want to move your car. Bruce looked confused until he followed my gaze. A tow truck was backing up to his BMW. No. Bruce ran outside, still in his pajamas, waving his arms at the tow truck driver. Marcus and I watched through the window as Bruce argued with the driver, who simply shrugged and continued hooking up the BMW. Car payment was 3 months behind, I explained to Marcus. Amazing how quickly they move when you call and tell them where to find the vehicle. Bruce came back inside, breathing hard. They took my car. Technically, the bank took their car. You just happened to be driving it. I handed him a bus schedule. The number 12 stops at the corner, runs every 20 minutes. This is insane. You can't just destroy my life because you're angry. I'm not destroying your life, Bruce. I'm just stopping the part where I subsidize it. I gathered the breakfast dishes, moving around the kitchen with practiced efficiency. You wanted Cora. You wanted honesty. You wanted to be free of our marriage. Congratulations, you got everything you asked for. Bruce's phone buzzed again. He looked at it and his face went grey. Cora, I asked. She says we need to talk. She says her father is... She says there might be legal implications. Adultery clauses in employment contracts are tricky things, Marcus said, especially when one party is the boss and the other is a subordinate. Creates all kinds of liability issues. Bruce stared at him. How do you know that? I read. Unlike some people. Marcus stood up and stretched. Kate, I should head to the gym. Thanks for breakfast. Thank you for the moral support. Marcus paused at the door. Bruce, word of advice. When you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. After Marcus left, Bruce and I stood in the kitchen in silence. The house felt different with him there now, like he was the visitor and I was the host. Kate, please, can we find a way to work this out? I made a mistake, but we can fix this. A mistake? Bruce, you had an affair for 6 months. You lied to me every day. You spent our money on another woman. You told me last night that you don't regret it. I loaded the dishwasher with careful precision. Which part of that was the mistake? Getting caught? All of it. I was stupid, I was selfish, but I love you. I've always loved you. No, you didn't. You loved the idea of me. The wife who managed your life, who made everything easy, who never asked too many questions. I closed the dishwasher and turned to face him. But you never loved me enough to be faithful. You never loved me enough to be honest. And you sure as hell never loved me enough to put our marriage first. Bruce's phone rang again. Cora's name flashed on the screen. Answer it, I said. She's your choice now. Go be with her. Bruce looked at the phone, then at me, then back at the phone. He answered on the 4th ring. Cora? Yes, I know about... What do you mean, evicted? How can they evict you? His voice rose with each word. What do you mean, trust fund clause? What clause? I smiled and started wiping down the counters. Trust fund clauses were fascinating things, especially the old-fashioned ones that included morality stipulations. Richard Watson came from very old money, the kind that came with very old rules. Bruce hung up the phone and stared at me. Cora's trust fund has been frozen. Something about moral turpitude. Her father cut off her credit cards. The lease on her apartment was in the company name, and they've terminated it. That's unfortunate, I said, not looking up from the counter. Kate, do you know something about this? I know that Richard Watson takes the family reputation very seriously. I know that Cora's trust fund has a morality clause that dates back to 1952. And I know that Linda was very helpful in providing documentation of Cora's extracurricular activities to the family lawyers. Bruce stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Who are you? I'm the woman you were married to for 18 years, the woman you thought you knew, the woman you thought would quietly disappear while you started your new life. I folded the dish towel and hung it on its hook. I'm Kate Hart, and I'm done being taken for granted. Bruce's phone buzzed with another text, then another. The gossip mill was in full swing. Pack your things, Bruce, all of them this time, and take the bus schedule. You're going to need it. He left 20 minutes later with 2 suitcases and a box of personal items. I watched from the window as he waited at the bus stop, checking his phone constantly, looking smaller and more lost with each passing minute. I poured myself another cup of coffee and opened my laptop. Project Silent Storm was ahead of schedule. 3 days after Bruce moved out, I received the most interesting phone call of my adult life. "Mrs. Hart, this is Richard Watson. I believe you know my daughter, Cora." I was in my office at the library, cataloguing new acquisitions, when the call came through. Richard Watson's voice was cultured, precise, with the kind of authority that came from generations of old money and older power. "Mr. Watson, how can I help you?" "I was wondering if you might join me for dinner tonight. At Morello's, 7 o'clock. Morello's was the restaurant in our town. The place where deals were made, relationships were announced, and social hierarchies were established. It was also Cora's favorite restaurant, the place she took Bruce for their business dinners that weren't business at all." "That's very kind of you, Mr. Watson. May I ask what this is about?" "I think we have some mutual interest to discuss regarding recent developments in our children's lives." I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "I'll see you at 7. The rest of the day passed in a blur of returned books and research requests. At 5:30, I left the library and drove home to prepare for what promised to be the most important dinner of my life. I stood in my closet for 10 minutes, considering my options. Then I reached for the red dress. Silk, perfectly tailored, with a neckline that was sophisticated rather than suggestive. I'd bought it 2 years ago for Bruce's company Christmas party, but he'd asked me to wear the black one instead. "Red's a bit much for a corporate event," he'd said. Tonight, red was perfect. I arrived at Morello's exactly at 7. The hostess, a young woman named Amanda, who'd been working there since high school, smiled when she saw me. "Mrs. Hart, Mr. Watson is waiting for you at table 12. Table 12 was Cora's usual table, the one with the perfect view of the entire restaurant, where she could see and be seen by everyone who mattered in town. Tonight, Richard Watson sat there alone, a distinguished man in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of bearing that commanded attention. He stood when I approached, extending his hand with old-fashioned courtesy. "Mrs. Hart, thank you for coming. Kate, please, and thank you for the invitation." Richard held my chair, waited for me to be seated, then signaled the waiter with a subtle gesture that spoke of decades of dining in places like this. "I took the liberty of ordering wine," he said. "I hope you don't mind. The Barolo is exceptional here." "That's very thoughtful." We made small talk while the wine was poured and our orders were taken. Richard was charming, intelligent, and completely at ease. I found myself genuinely enjoying his company, which was more than I could say for most of Bruce's business associates. "You're probably wondering why I asked you here," Richard said after our appetizers arrived. "I assume it has something to do with your daughter and my soon-to-be ex-husband." "Indeed." Richard sipped his wine thoughtfully. "Cora has always been impulsive. Even as a child, she had difficulty understanding consequences. I'm afraid I may have enabled that tendency." "Children of privilege often struggle with boundaries," I said diplomatically, spoken like a librarian, tactful and well-read. Richard smiled. "But we both know Cora crossed more than boundaries. She destroyed a marriage, compromised her professional integrity, and embarrassed our family name." I waited. In my experience, powerful men like Richard Watson didn't invite librarian wives to dinner just to apologize for their daughters. "I've spent the past 3 days cleaning up her mess," Richard continued, "smoothing things over with the board, managing the legal implications, dealing with the trust fund complications. It's been exhausting." "I imagine it has." "The thing is, Kate, may I call you Kate? I find myself in the unusual position of being impressed by someone who isn't family." "I'm not sure I follow." Richard leaned forward slightly. "My daughter thought she was playing chess with a woman who didn't know the rules. Instead, she found herself in a game with someone who'd been planning moves she couldn't even see." The waiter appeared with our main courses, perfectly prepared salmon for me, filet mignon for Richard. We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes while I processed his words. The trust fund clause, I said finally. Established by my grandfather in 1952, moral turpitude provisions that seemed archaic until this week. Richard cut his steak with surgical precision. Cora never bothered to read the documents. She assumed the money would always be there. And now? Now she's learning that actions have consequences. The trust fund is frozen pending a review by the family lawyers. Her position at Morrison Associates has been terminated. Her apartment lease, which was paid through the company, has been cancelled. I took a sip of wine, letting the implication settle. That seems comprehensive. I don't do anything halfway, Kate. It's a family trait. Unfortunately, Cora inherited the intensity without the wisdom. As if summoned by our conversation, the restaurant's front door opened and Cora Watson walked in. She was with Bruce, both of them looking harried and desperate. Cora wore a black dress that had seen better days, and Bruce's shirt was wrinkled like he'd slept in it. Interesting timing, Richard murmured. Amanda, the hostess, was speaking to Cora in low, urgent tones. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see Cora's face growing red with anger and embarrassment. No reservation, Richard explained, and the restaurant is fully booked. Cora's voice rose loud enough for nearby tables to hear. I don't care about reservations. I eat here twice a week. That's my table. She was pointing at table 12, where Richard and I sat enjoying our dinner. Not anymore, Richard said quietly. Amanda was clearly uncomfortable, caught between a former regular customer and the reality of a full restaurant. Cora pushed past her and marched toward our table, Bruce trailing behind like a reluctant shadow. Daddy, Cora said, ignoring me completely. What are you doing here? Having dinner, with Kate. Richard's voice was cool, controlled. You remember Kate, don't you? Bruce's wife? Ex-wife, Bruce said quickly. We're separated. Not yet, I said pleasantly. The papers haven't been finalized. Cora looked between her father and me, clearly trying to understand the dynamic. Daddy, we need to talk. About the trust fund, about the apartment, about everything. I'm having dinner, Cora. Perhaps you could make an appointment with my secretary. The restaurant had gone quiet, not obviously so, but in the way that happens when everyone is pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. I can't make an appointment with your secretary, Cora hissed. I'm your daughter. You're the daughter who's been sleeping with a married man in her office. You're the daughter who compromised our family's reputation and the company's legal standing. You're the daughter who never bothered to read the trust fund documents that have supported your lifestyle for 35 years. Cora's face went white, then red, then white again. You can't cut me off. That money is mine. That money is the family's, and the family has standards. Bruce stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable but trying to support Cora. Mr. Watson, with all due respect, Cora and I are in love. We're planning a future together. Richard looked at Bruce like he was examining an interesting but ultimately worthless specimen. Are you? How do you plan to support that future? You're unemployed, your car has been repossessed, and your credit is destroyed. That's temporary, Bruce said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Richard turned to me. Kate, didn't you mention that Bruce's references from Morrison Associates might be problematic? I hadn't mentioned any such thing, but I played along. Sexual harassment in the workplace creates liability issues. Most companies are reluctant to hire someone with that kind of history. Bruce's face went red. It wasn't harassment. Cora was my boss. She pursued me. That makes it worse, not better, I said gently. Power dynamics, you understand. Cora finally acknowledged my presence, and the look she gave me could have melted steel. You did this. You destroyed everything out of spite. I didn't destroy anything, Cora. I simply stopped enabling it. I took another sip of wine. You and Bruce made your choices. I just made sure you got to live with the consequences. You vindictive person. The restaurant went completely silent. Richard's face darkened. Cora, you will apologize to Kate immediately, and then you will leave. I will not apologize to her. She ruined my life. You ruined your own life. Kate simply declined to subsidize the destruction. I stood up, smoothing my red dress. It's all right, Richard. I think I'll visit the ladies' room. Give you a moment with your daughter. The ladies' room at Morello's was as elegant as the rest of the restaurant. Marble counters, soft lighting, fresh flowers. I was touching up my lipstick when Cora burst through the door. You think you're so smart, she said, her voice shaking with rage. You think you've won. I think I've protected myself, I said calmly, continuing with my lipstick. There's a difference. Bruce loves me. He's going to marry me. Bruce loved the idea of you, the excitement, the secrecy, the ego boost of having his boss interested in him. I capped my lipstick and turned to face her. But love, real love, Bruce doesn't know what that is. If he did, he wouldn't have cheated on his wife of 18 years. Cora stepped closer, trying to intimidate me. You don't know anything about our relationship. I know he's been calling me every night since you lost your apartment. I know he's been sleeping on your office couch since the company fired you both. I know he asked me yesterday if he could come home. Cora's face went white. You're lying. Check his phone. Check the call log. I walked to the sink and washed my hands. Bruce doesn't want a relationship, Cora. He wants someone to take care of him. For 18 years, that was me. He thought it would be you, but you're not in a position to take care of anyone right now, are you? My father will come around. He always does. Your father invited me to dinner at your favorite restaurant and ordered your favorite wine. He's sitting at your usual table, having a lovely conversation about literature and art and things that matter. I dried my hands on a plush towel. I don't think he's planning to come around anytime soon. Cora's hands were shaking. What do you want? Money? I'll pay you to leave Bruce alone. With what money? Your trust fund is frozen, your job is gone, and your credit cards are cancelled. I walked toward the door, then paused. But even if you had money, I wouldn't take it. Bruce made his choice. Now he gets to live with it. I opened the door to leave, then turned back one more time. Oh, and Cora, next time you decide to have an affair with a married man, you might want to make sure his wife isn't smarter than both of you combined. I walked back to the table, where Richard was sitting alone, looking remarkably composed for a man who'd just disowned his daughter. Everything all right? He asked as I sat down. Perfect. Where did Bruce go? He's waiting outside. Apparently, Cora's driving tonight. Such as it is. Through the window, I could see Bruce standing next to a rusted Honda Civic that had seen better days. Cora emerged from the restaurant, her face streaked with tears and rage. That's Cora's car, I asked. Rental. Her BMW was repossessed yesterday. Richard signaled for the check. I believe she's learning about the real world rather quickly. We watched as Cora and Bruce got into the Honda. Cora was gesticulating wildly, clearly upset, while Bruce sat in the passenger seat, looking like he wanted to disappear. He looks miserable, Richard observed. He should. He gave up a comfortable life for a fantasy. Now the fantasy is a nightmare, and the comfortable life is gone. Richard raised his wine glass. To wives who know their worth. I clinked my glass against his. To fathers who enforce consequences. As we finished our dinner, I noticed the other diners watching us with undisguised curiosity. By tomorrow, everyone in town would know about the scene at Morello's. They'd know that Richard Watson had chosen Kate Hart over his own daughter. They'd know that Cora and Bruce were broke, desperate, and falling apart. Most importantly, they'd know that I wasn't the victim in this story. I was the woman in the red dress who'd outplayed everyone and walked away with her dignity intact. Richard paid the check and walked me to my car. Kate, I hope this isn't the last time we have dinner together. You're excellent company. I'd like that very much. Good. I'll call you next week. Perhaps we can discuss that investment opportunity I mentioned. I drove home through the quiet suburban streets. past the perfect houses with their perfect lawns and their imperfect secrets. My house sat at the end of the cul-de-sac, every light glowing warmly, looking exactly like the home I'd always dreamed it would be. Inside, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop. Project Silent Storm was exceeding all expectations. Bruce's new reality was just beginning. The call came at 7 in the morning, exactly 1 week after the dinner at Morello's. I was in my kitchen, making coffee and reading the local newspaper's society page, which featured a small but telling item about Richard Watson's dinner companion at the town's most exclusive restaurant. "Kate, it's Linda Martinez." Cora's former assistant sounded nervous, which was unusual. Linda had been nothing but confident during our coffee meeting the week before, when she'd provided such helpful documentation of Cora's workplace activities. "Linda, good morning. How are you settling in at your new position?" After Cora's termination, Linda had been promoted to executive assistant to the regional director. It was a significant step up, with better pay and considerably more job security. "That's actually why I'm calling. There's something you need to know about Bruce." I set down my coffee cup. "What about Bruce?" "He's been coming to the office, not inside, but hanging around the parking lot, trying to talk to people as they come and go. Yesterday he cornered me at lunch and started asking about Cora's files, her contacts, whether there might be any way for them to get their jobs back." "And what did you tell him?" "The truth, that Cora's files were sealed by legal, her contacts won't return her calls, and Morrison Associates would rather burn the building down than rehire either of them." Linda paused. "But Kate, he looked desperate, really desperate, and he kept asking about you." "What kind of questions?" "Whether you'd been in touch with anyone at the company, whether you'd said anything about him to the board members, whether there was any way to, and I quote, fix the situation with Kate." I walked to my kitchen window and looked out at the perfectly manicured neighborhood. 2 houses down, Mrs. Peterson was walking her dog, the same routine she'd followed for 15 years. Everything looked normal, peaceful, unchanged, but underneath the suburban tranquility, Bruce was unraveling. "Linda, I appreciate you telling me this. Is there anything else? Just be careful, okay? I've seen men like Bruce before. Men who think they're entitled to things, who can't handle it when the world doesn't work the way they expected. When they get cornered, they don't always make smart decisions." After Linda hung up, I sat in my kitchen thinking. Bruce had always been predictable, which had made planning his downfall relatively straightforward. But desperation could make people unpredictable, and unpredictable people were dangerous. I picked up my phone and called Marcus. "Kate, everything okay? I need a favor. Are you available for some extra security work?" "What kind of security work?" "The kind where you're visible and intimidating, and Bruce Hart remembers that he's not the only man in my life." Marcus chuckled. "I can do visible and intimidating. When do you need me?" "Tonight, and probably for the next few weeks." "Done. What's Bruce up to?" "Nothing good. I'll explain tonight." I spent the morning at the library, losing myself in the familiar rhythms of cataloguing and research. But even surrounded by books and the quiet hum of intellectual activity, I couldn't shake the feeling that Bruce was planning something. At lunch, I drove to the small cafe downtown, where I'd arranged to meet Victoria. My sister was already there, looking perfectly put together in her lawyer uniform of navy suit and sensible heels. "You look worried," Victoria said as I sat down. "Bruce has been lurking around Morrison Associates, asking questions about getting his job back." "That's pathetic, not worrying." "Linda thinks he's getting desperate, and desperate Bruce is unpredictable Bruce." Victoria sipped her iced tea thoughtfully. "Do you want me to have someone talk to him? Officially, I mean. Legal warning about harassment?" "Not yet, but maybe we should accelerate the timeline on the other projects." "The investment opportunity with Richard?" "Among other things." I pulled out my phone and showed Victoria a text message. Richard wants to meet this afternoon to discuss the wine distribution business. Victoria grinned. Wives who won wines. I love it. How much is he thinking? Enough to make us financially independent. Enough to make Bruce irrelevant. Even better. Victoria leaned forward. Kate, I have to ask. Are you sure about Richard? I mean, he's Cora's father. This could get complicated. Richard Watson is a businessman first and a father second. Cora embarrassed him, cost him money, and damaged his reputation. He's not going to forgive that anytime soon. And if he does, then we'll have enough money and enough connections to handle whatever comes next. That afternoon, I met Richard at his office downtown. The Watson building was old money incarnate. Marble floors, mahogany paneling, oil portraits of distinguished ancestors who'd made their fortunes in railroads and steel. Richard's office occupied the entire top floor, with windows overlooking the river and furniture that probably cost more than most people's cars. He stood when I entered, the same old-fashioned courtesy he'd shown at Morello's. Kate, thank you for coming. Please, sit down. I settled into a leather chair that was probably older than I was. You mentioned an investment opportunity. Several, actually, but let's start with your wine distribution idea. Richard opened a folder on his desk. I've had my people run some numbers. The market for premium wines in suburban markets is underserved, particularly wines marketed specifically to women. Wives Who Won Wines isn't just about marketing to women. It's about creating a community. Wine tastings, book clubs, networking events, places where women can connect over shared experiences. Shared experiences like divorce. Among other things, divorce, career changes, empty nest syndrome, starting over. I leaned forward. There are a lot of women out there who've been supporting other people's dreams for decades. Now they're ready to invest in their own. Richard smiled. I like it. I'm prepared to offer initial funding of $2 million for a 40% stake. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was celebrating. $2 million would make me financially independent for life. It would also send a very clear message to Bruce about exactly how irrelevant he'd become. That's generous. What's the timeline? We could have papers drawn up by the end of the week. I'd like to move quickly on this. Any particular reason for the urgency? Richard's expression darkened slightly. Cora has been persistent in her attempts to reconcile. She seems to think that if she can fix her relationship with Bruce, somehow everything else will fall into place. And you want to make it clear that ship has sailed. I want to make it clear that I'm investing in winners, not losers. You're a winner, Kate. Cora chose to align herself with a loser. We shook hands on the deal, and I left Richard's office feeling like I was walking on air. In 1 week, I'd gone from betrayed wife to business owner. Bruce had traded a marriage with a successful entrepreneur for an affair with an unemployed trust fund baby. The irony was delicious. I was so caught up in my triumph that I almost didn't notice Bruce's Honda Civic parked across the street from the Watson building. Almost. I pretended not to see him as I walked to my car, but I could feel his eyes on me. He was watching, waiting, trying to figure out what I was doing in his former girlfriend's father's office building. Let him wonder. I drove home through the afternoon traffic, taking my time, enjoying the feeling of success. Bruce could lurk and scheme and ask all the questions he wanted. It wouldn't change the fundamental reality of his situation. He'd gambled everything on Cora, and Cora had nothing left to offer. Marcus was waiting in my driveway when I got home, leaning against his pickup truck like a mountain in human form. How'd the meeting go? He asked as I got out of my car. Better than expected. Much better. I looked around the neighborhood. Any sign of Bruce? Not yet, but I did have an interesting conversation with your neighbor, Mrs. Peterson. Apparently, Bruce drove by the house 3 times yesterday, slowing down each time like he was looking for something. Or someone. That's what I figured. Don't worry, I'll be around. We walked into the house together, and I felt safer immediately. Marcus had that effect on people. He was the kind of man who made problems disappear simply by existing. I made dinner for both of us, and we sat in my kitchen talking about the wine business, the neighborhood gossip, and everything except Bruce. It was comfortable, easy, the kind of evening I'd forgotten was possible. At 9 o'clock, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message. "Bruce is at Morello's," he said, reading the screen. "Amanda texted me. He's been there for an hour, drinking alone, asking the waitstaff questions about you and Richard." "What kind of questions?" "Whether you've been there together, how often, whether it looked like business or personal." Marcus stood up. "I think I'll take a drive over there. Make sure he's not planning anything stupid." "Be careful." "Always am." Marcus left, and I was alone in my perfect house with my perfect kitchen and my perfectly planned revenge. Everything was going exactly as I'd hoped. Bruce was isolated, desperate, and running out of options. Cora was broke and disgraced. Richard was my business partner and ally. So why did I feel like something was about to go wrong? My phone rang at 10:30. "Marcus. Kate, you need to know what just happened. Bruce tried to start a fight with me at Morello's, in front of half the town." "What do you mean, tried?" "He was drunk, belligerent, accusing me of stealing his wife, his life, his future. I didn't engage, just stood there while he made an ass of himself. But Kate, he's not just desperate anymore. He's angry, really angry." "What did he say exactly?" "That you're a vindictive person who destroyed his life out of spite. That you turned everyone against him. That you're going to pay for what you've done." I felt a chill run down my spine. He threatened me. Not directly, but the implication was clear. Amanda called the police, and they escorted him out. But Kate, I don't think this is over. After Marcus hung up, I double-checked all the locks on my doors and windows. I closed the curtains and turned on the security system Bruce had insisted we install 3 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. I sat in my living room, surrounded by the life I'd built, the home I'd created, the future I'd secured. Bruce could rage and threaten and drink himself into oblivion, but he couldn't change the fundamental truth. He'd made his choice, and now he had to live with the consequences. But as I sat there, in my perfect house, I couldn't shake the feeling that Bruce wasn't done making bad decisions, and his next bad decision might involve me. Saturday morning arrived grey and drizzly, the kind of November weather that made everything look tired and worn. I was in my kitchen making coffee when I heard the unmistakable sound of gravel crunching in my driveway. Through the window, I saw Bruce's borrowed Honda Civic parked behind my car, blocking me in. He sat behind the wheel for several minutes, staring at the house like he was trying to decide something. Finally, he got out and walked to my front door. He looked terrible, unshaven, clothes wrinkled, the kind of desperate that came from too many sleepless nights and too much cheap whiskey. The doorbell rang 3 times before I answered it. "Kate, we need to talk." "No, we don't." I kept the door mostly closed, just a crack open to speak through. "You need to leave." "Please, just 5 minutes. I know I screwed up, but we can fix this." "There's nothing to fix, Bruce. You made your choice." "I made a mistake, a stupid, selfish mistake, but it's over now. Cora and I, it's finished. She's gone." I opened the door a little wider. Bruce looked even worse up close. His hands were shaking slightly, and he smelled like he'd been sleeping in his car. "Where did Cora go?" "Back to her mother in Connecticut. Said she couldn't handle the embarrassment anymore." Bruce ran his hands through his unwashed hair. "Kate, I lost everything. My job, my car, my friends. The only thing I have left is you. You don't have me, Bruce. You gave me up 6 months ago. I was an idiot. I was having some kind of midlife crisis, and I made the worst decision of my life. But I love you. I've always loved you." I stared at him through the crack in the door. 3 weeks ago, those words might have meant something. 3 weeks ago, I might have been tempted to believe him, to think that maybe we could work through this. Now, all I felt was pity. "Bruce, go home." I don't have a home. Cora's apartment is gone. I can't afford a place of my own, and my mother won't return my calls. That's not my problem. Kate, please, I'm begging you, let me come home. Let me try to make this right. I looked at this man I'd been married to for 18 years. The man who'd shared my bed, my dreams, my life. The man who'd thrown it all away for 6 months of excitement with his boss. No. I closed the door and turned the deadbolt. Bruce stood on my porch for another 10 minutes, occasionally knocking or calling my name, but I ignored him. Eventually, I heard the Honda start up and drive away. 2 hours later, I was at the tennis club with Richard, playing doubles against the Hendersons, a retired couple who'd been club champions for the past 5 years. Richard was a surprisingly good tennis player for a man in his 60s, with the kind of precise, strategic game that came from decades of practice. We were up 4-2 in the first set when Bruce appeared at the fence surrounding the court. "Kate," he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We need to talk." The game stopped. The Hendersons looked embarrassed. Richard looked annoyed. The other players on nearby courts turned to stare. "Bruce, you need to leave," I called back. "This is a private club." "I'm a member too." "Not anymore," Richard said quietly. "I had your membership revoked yesterday." Bruce's face went red. "You can't do that." "I can, and I did. You're trespassing." Bruce rattled the gate, which was locked. "Kate, stop hiding behind your new boyfriend and talk to me." "Bruce, go home," I said, walking toward the fence. "You're embarrassing yourself." "I'm embarrassing myself? You're the one who destroyed our marriage for revenge." The entire tennis club was watching now. Conversations had stopped, games had paused, and everyone was staring at the spectacle of Bruce Hart having a public breakdown. "I didn't destroy our marriage, Bruce, you did, when you decided Cora was more important than the vows you made to me." "That's over. I told you, Cora's gone. It's just you and me now." "No, Bruce, it's just you." Richard stepped up beside me. "Bruce, you need to leave before I call security." "Security?" Bruce laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You're going to call security on me? I've been a member of this club for 10 years. You were a member when you were married to Kate and had a job. Now you're neither." Richard's voice was calm, authoritative. "You have 30 seconds to leave voluntarily." Bruce looked around at the crowd that had gathered, familiar faces, people who'd been his friends and colleagues and neighbors. Now they were looking at him like he was a stranger, an intruder, a problem to be solved. "This is insane," he said, but his voice had lost its edge. "Kate, these people don't care about you. They're just entertained by the drama." "Maybe, but they're my friends now, not yours." Bruce stared at me for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Well," said Mrs. Henderson after Bruce had disappeared, "that was interesting." "I'm sorry you had to see that," I said. "Don't apologize," Richard said. "Bruce made his choices. Now he gets to live with them." We finished our tennis match. Richard and I won in straight sets, and then sat on the club's terrace, drinking iced tea and watching the other players. It was peaceful, civilized, exactly the kind of life I'd always wanted. "Kate," Richard said after a while, "I've been thinking about our business partnership." "Second thoughts?" "Quite the opposite. I'd like to accelerate the timeline, have the papers signed by Monday, get the funding transferred immediately." "Any particular reason for the rush?" Richard looked out over the tennis courts, where well-dressed people were playing genteel games in the afternoon sun. "Bruce's desperation is escalating. I think it would be wise to make your financial independence official as quickly as possible." "You think he might try something?" "I think desperate men do desperate things, and I think you should be prepared." That evening, Marcus came over for dinner. I made his favorite meal, grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, and a bottle of wine that cost more than Bruce's weekly unemployment check. We ate on my back patio, surrounded by the garden I'd spent years cultivating. "How was tennis?" Marcus asked. "Educational." Bruce showed up and made a scene. Marcus's expression darkened. What kind of scene? I told him about the confrontation at the club, Bruce's public breakdown, the way he'd looked at me like I was the enemy. I don't like it, Marcus said. He's escalating, first lurking around the office, then showing up at your house, now making scenes at the club. What's next? I don't know, but Richard's accelerating the business deal. By Monday, I'll be financially independent. Good. The sooner you're completely free of Bruce, the better. We were cleaning up the dinner dishes when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Kate Hart. Mrs. Hart, this is Officer Rodriguez with the Township Police. We've had a complaint about harassment. A Bruce Hart claims you've been stalking him, interfering with his employment opportunities, and turning people against him. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair. Officer Rodriguez, Bruce Hart is my estranged husband. He's the one who's been harassing me. Ma'am, we have to investigate all complaints. Would you be available to come to the station tomorrow to give a statement? Of course. But Officer Rodriguez, Bruce has been showing up at my house uninvited, lurking around my workplace, and making scenes at my social club. I have witnesses. We'll need statements from them too. Can you have them contact us? After I hung up, Marcus looked at me with concern. What was that about? Bruce filed a harassment complaint against me. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. The man has balls. I'll give him that. Cheats on his wife, loses his job, gets cut off by his girlfriend's family, and then tries to make himself the victim. It won't stick. Too many people have seen his behavior. Maybe, but Kate, this is exactly what I was worried about. Bruce is rewriting history in his head. He's making you the villain in his story. Let him. The truth is the truth. But even as I said it, I felt a chill of worry. Bruce had always been good at manipulating situations, at making himself look like the wrong party. What if he convinced people that I'd been the aggressor? What if his version of events gained traction? My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. This isn't over, Kate. You destroyed my life, and I'm going to return the favor. I showed the message to Marcus, who immediately called the police. Officer Rodriguez, this is Marcus Caldwell. I'm calling to report a threatening text message sent to Kate Hart. While Marcus dealt with the police, I sat in my kitchen and thought about the past 3 weeks. Everything had gone according to plan. Bruce was isolated, broke, and desperate. Cora was gone. Richard was my business partner. I'd won every battle. So why did I feel like the war was just beginning? My phone rang again. This time, it was Richard. Kate, I just heard from my security team. Bruce was seen outside my building again this afternoon, taking pictures. Pictures of what? The building, the parking garage, your car. Kate, I think you should stay somewhere else tonight. I'm not running from Bruce. I'm not asking you to run. I'm asking you to be smart. Bruce's behavior is escalating, and escalation leads to confrontation. I'd rather that confrontation happen somewhere other than your home. I looked around my perfect kitchen, my perfect house, the life I'd built and fought to protect. No, this is my home. If Bruce wants a confrontation, he can have it, but it'll be on my terms, in my space. Kate, Richard, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not hiding from my own husband. Ex-husband. Soon-to-be ex-husband. The point stands. After I hung up, Marcus looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Kate, Richard's right. Bruce is dangerous right now. Bruce is pathetic. He's a middle-aged man having a tantrum because his actions had consequences. Pathetic men can be the most dangerous kind. I walked to my kitchen window and looked out at the quiet suburban street. Mrs. Peterson was walking her dog. The Hendersons were getting their mail. Everything looked normal, peaceful, safe. But I knew Marcus was right. Bruce was out there somewhere, angry and desperate, and looking for someone to blame. And he'd decided that someone was me. The storm hit Sunday night with the kind of fury that made the house shake and the power flicker. I sat in my living room, watching the rain lash against the windows, listening to the wind howl through the trees. Marcus had wanted to stay, but I'd sent him home. Whatever was coming, I wanted to face it on my own terms. At 11:30, the doorbell rang. I knew it was Bruce before I looked through the peephole. He stood on my porch, soaked to the skin, holding a bouquet of grocery store flowers that were already wilting in the rain. I opened the door, but kept the chain lock engaged. "Kate, please. Just let me come in for a minute. I'm drowning out here." He looked pathetic. His hair was plastered to his head, his clothes were soaked through, and he was shivering from the cold. The flowers in his hand looked as defeated as he did. "Bruce, go home." "I don't have a home. I've been sleeping in my car for 3 days. That's not my problem." "Kate, I know I hurt you. I know I made terrible mistakes. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work through it. We can—" "Bruce, stop." I looked at this man I'd been married to for 18 years, this man who'd shared my bed and my dreams and my life, and felt nothing but pity. "It's over. We're over. The papers will be finalized next week." "What papers?" "The divorce papers, the business partnership papers, the restraining order papers." I counted them off on my fingers. "You're going to be legally required to stay away from me, Bruce. No more surprise visits, no more scenes at the tennis club, no more harassment complaints to the police." Bruce's face went through several emotions: surprise, anger, desperation, and finally something that looked like rage. "You can't do this to me, Kate. I won't let you." "You don't get a vote anymore, Bruce. You gave up that right when you decided Cora was more important than our marriage. I told you that's over. Cora's gone. It's just you and me now." "No, Bruce, it's just you." I started to close the door, but Bruce threw his shoulder against it, straining the chain lock. "Kate, listen to me. You think you've won, but you haven't. You think you can just throw me away like garbage, but I won't let you." The chain lock held, but barely. Bruce was stronger than he looked, and desperation was making him stronger still. "Bruce, you need to leave right now, or I'm calling the police. Call them. Tell them how you destroyed my life. Tell them how you turned everyone against me. Tell them how you stole my friends, my job, my future." "I didn't steal anything, Bruce. You threw it all away." Bruce stopped pushing against the door and stepped back, rain streaming down his face. "You know what? You're right. I did throw it all away. For 6 months of excitement with a woman who didn't give a damn about me. For 6 months of feeling young and desired and alive. Bruce, do you know what Cora said when she left? She said I was boring. She said I was a middle-aged loser who couldn't even afford to take her to dinner anymore. She said she never loved me. She was just using me to get back at her father for something." I felt a stab of something that might have been sympathy. "Bruce, I'm sorry she hurt you." "Are you?" "Because you're the one who made it possible. You're the one who destroyed her life so she'd destroy mine." "I didn't destroy Cora's life. She did that herself. By sleeping with me? By having an affair with a married man?" Bruce laughed, a bitter sound that mixed with the rain. "You know what's funny, Kate? I wasn't her first married man. I wasn't even her second. Cora's been having affairs with married employees for years, but you were the first wife who fought back." I stared at him through the crack in the door. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you won. You got your revenge. You destroyed both of us, and you walked away clean." Bruce dropped the wilted flowers on my porch. "But you know what else I learned about Cora? She keeps records, photos, videos, documents, insurance, she called it." "Bruce, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about Richard Watson, Kate, your new business partner, your new best friend, the man who's been so helpful in funding your new life." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What about Richard?" "Cora wasn't just sleeping with me, Kate. She was sleeping with Richard, too. Her own father. For years." The world tilted sideways. I gripped the doorframe to keep from falling. "You're lying." "Am I? Why do you think Richard was so quick to cut Cora off? Why do you think he was so eager to partner with you? It wasn't about business, Kate. It was about keeping Cora quiet. That's impossible. Richard would never what? Sleep with his own daughter, fund his daughter's lifestyle in exchange for sexual favors, use his daughter to seduce his business rivals and then destroy them when he was done. Bruce pulled out his phone and held it up to the crack in the door. On the screen was a video that sent a chill through me. Richard and Cora, in what looked like Richard's office, doing things that no father and daughter should ever do. Cora gave me this before she left, said it was her insurance policy, said if Richard ever tried to destroy her completely, she'd take him down with her. Bruce put the phone back in his pocket. She also said you were just another mark, Kate, another wife that Richard was using to cover his tracks. I closed the door and leaned against it, my mind reeling. Everything I'd thought I knew, everything I'd planned, everything I'd built, it was all based on a lie. Bruce's voice came through the door, gentler now. Kate, I know I hurt you, I know I betrayed you, but we're both victims here. Richard's been playing us against each other from the beginning. I opened the door, this time removing the chain lock completely. Bruce stepped inside, dripping water on my hardwood floors. He looked around the living room like he was seeing it for the first time. God, I missed this place. I missed you. Bruce, if what you're saying is true, it's true. I have more evidence. Financial records showing payments from Richard to Cora going back 5 years. Hotel receipts from when they traveled together. Photos from family vacations that look a lot more intimate than they should. I sank into my favorite armchair, the one Bruce had always complained was too expensive. Why are you telling me this? Because Richard's using you the same way he used Cora. The business partnership, the funding, the friendship, it's all designed to keep you quiet and compliant while he moves on to his next victim. But Cora's gone. What does he need to cover up? Bruce sat down on the couch, careful not to drip too much water on the cushions. There are others, Kate. Cora wasn't the only daughter of a business associate that Richard's been involved with. She wasn't even the only employee. Richard Watson is a predator, and he's been using his money and power to cover it up for decades. I thought about my dinner at Morello's, the way Richard had been so charming, so understanding, so eager to help me get revenge on Bruce and Cora. I thought about the business partnership, the $2 million, the way he'd wanted to move so quickly. He's been planning this since the beginning, I said slowly. Since the moment Cora told him about the affair. Richard saw an opportunity to get rid of Cora and Bruce, and he used you to do it. I stood up and walked to the window. The storm was starting to pass, but the damage was done. My perfect plan, my perfect revenge, my perfect new life, it was all built on Richard's manipulation. So what do we do now? I asked. Bruce joined me at the window. We expose him, together. We take all the evidence to the authorities, to the press, to anyone who'll listen. We make sure Richard Watson pays for what he's done. I looked at Bruce, really looked at him, for the first time in months. He was still the man who'd betrayed me, who'd lied to me, who'd thrown away our marriage for 6 months of excitement, but he was also the only person who understood what Richard had done to both of us. And then what? We get back together? Pretend none of this happened? Bruce was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Maybe we can't go back to what we were. Maybe too much has happened. But Kate, we can't let Richard win. We can't let him destroy people and walk away clean. I thought about Cora, broken and humiliated, fleeing to her mother in Connecticut. I thought about Bruce, sleeping in his car, desperate and alone. I thought about myself, so proud of my clever revenge, never realizing I was just another pawn in Richard's game. Okay, I said finally. We expose him. But Bruce, this doesn't fix what you did to me. This doesn't erase the affair or the lies or the betrayal. I know, but maybe it's a start. We spent the rest of the night going through Bruce's evidence, planning our approach, figuring out how to bring down Richard Watson without destroying ourselves in the process. It wasn't reconciliation exactly, but it was partnership. It was two people who'd been used and manipulated, fighting back against the man who'd orchestrated their destruction. At dawn, I made coffee, and we sat in my kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of our old life and the uncertainty of whatever came next. "Kate," Bruce said, "I need you to know something. Even if we can't fix this, even if we can't go back to what we were, I never stopped loving you. The affair, the lies, the stupidity, none of that changed how I felt about you." I looked at this man I'd been married to for 18 years. This man I'd planned to destroy. This man who'd just saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. "I know," I said. "I never stopped loving you either. That's what made the betrayal so devastating. So, what happens now?" I stood up and walked to my laptop, opening a new document. At the top, I typed, "Project Truthstorm. Now we take down Richard Watson, together." Bruce smiled for the first time in weeks. I liked the sound of that. Outside, the storm had passed, and the sun was beginning to rise over our quiet suburban neighborhood. Mrs. Peterson was walking her dog. The Hendersons were getting their mail, and everything looked normal and peaceful and safe. But nothing was normal anymore. Everything had changed, and for the first time since this whole mess began, I was looking forward to what came next. The end final character count, 62,847 characters.